How is it that we find ourselves surrounded by such complexity, such elegance?
The genes of you and me, the genes of you and me, are all made of DNA. We're all made of the same chemical DNA. We're all made of DNA.
Hi, you're listening to DNA Today, a multi-award winning podcast and radio show where we discover new advances in the world of genetics. From genetic technology like CRISPR to rare diseases to new research. For over a decade, DNA Today has brought you the voices of leaders in genetics in over 200 episodes. For the past 3 years, DNA Today has won the People's Choice Best Science and Medicine Podcast Award. I'm Kira Deneen. I'm a certified genetic counselor and your host. We're very excited to be recording in NBC's Stamford studios because our guest is a trailblazer in talk shows. He is one of the most well-known talk show hosts with over 30 years of experience in giving really challenging and sensitive issues truth to light there. And so he has expertise in paternity testing, which is what we're going to be chatting about on today's show. He is synonymous with the catchphrase, "You are not the father," or "You are the father," the one and only Maury Povich.
Kira,
thank you.
Thanks for having me.
It's a great iconic line.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you come up with it, Maury?
Well, it's interesting because it happened in a very strange way. I guess if I've done talk shows for 31 years, maybe 20 years or so ago, some of my producers said, "Why don't we do some paternity testing on the show?" I said, "Really?" "Yeah." And it was fascinating because you saw these themes played out on soap operas, and they took 6 months, for instance, to find out who the father was of these children. And yet on our show with DNA testing, we can tell the story, have the guests on, and within 12 minutes, we can have the answer. And so the audience, the guests, the live audience, they all know. So the producers are, the first show we ever did on paternity testing, we're sitting down, they're briefing me right before the show, and they said, and the result is, and I went, I don't think I want to know the result. I don't want to know anything that the guest doesn't know, or the live audience in our studio, or the audience at home. Because if I know more than they do, I would get this story out in a way that nobody else knows because I'm the only one who would know. I don't want to know. So when I open up the envelope, I want to be as surprised as anybody. And that's where the inflection of "you are the father, you are not the..." It's my honest reaction to the storyline. And so that's how the inflection came. It's just become part of me. If I go, I live in New York. If I go out on the streets, "I am not the father, more. I'm not the father. I am the father. Can you take a selfie with me? Can you tell my wife I'm the father?" So that's what it's like.
And people really know you from this tagline.
Yeah.
I mean, I said to some friends, you were coming on the show here, and they were like, "Oh, "You are the father, you're not the father guy." I'm like, exactly. That's him. That's it.
So, I never expected it. But that's
you didn't think that would become your catchphrase almost.
Yeah, 20-some years later.
All right, so let's take it back even further then. How did you get into becoming a talk show host? I mean, as someone that's hosted a podcast for 10 years,
right.
I very much look up to you as doing this 20 plus years that I've been doing.
People might not, I don't know how old you have to be. I started out in news. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. I started in news there. I did a local talk show there, a very newsy Today Show type program. I bounced around the country. I worked in Chicago and Los Angeles and San Francisco and Philadelphia and then back to Washington. And I was doing news and reporting news and doing some local talk shows. Just some basic, like your basic local talk show that you would have here in New York, in the New York area, and around the country. And then I was plucked out of Washington when I was doing the 10 o'clock news there and a talk show to come and start this crazy show in 1986 called A Current Affair. And it became a very popular, irreverent kind of a tabloid news show. And I did that for 5 years. And then I said, it's very kind of confining, just introducing these various stories. I'm not really doing a lot of in-depth work. If I go back to doing talk shows, maybe that would that would suffice as to say it would satisfy me. And so I started with the Paramount Company, the big studio, and we did this talk show for 7 years. And it was first of all, it was in the days of the golden age of talk. We had Phil Donahue, Oprah Winfrey, Geraldo Rivera, Sally Jesse Raphael, Joan Rivers, Jenny Jones. I mean, there were 8, 10, 12 of us who had talk shows every single day on television. And it was a rather, I don't want to say benign, but it was kind of a news-oriented, celebrity-oriented. You know, I would have people on Secret Crush Day, something like that. And so that was the show. And then after 7 years, I moved to NBC Universal. And we kind of continued that theme for the first few years. And then the producers came up with these two ideas, paternity testing and lie detector tests. And so that's what's been the main theme, that and out of control teenagers, the main themes of our show for the last 20 odd years.
And it makes for very engaging TV, and you really want to see what's going to happen, I think, especially with these paternity tests.
An NFL quarterback told me one time that all in the locker room before practice, they had the show on. They used to watch the show all the time. And then the coaches would be calling for practice, and they wouldn't go out.
Because the segment wasn't done yet. They didn't know, was he the father or not?
To find out who the father was. Shaquille O'Neal, who's a big fan of the show, he used to say that he and his buddies used to bet on whether they were the father or not. So, I mean, it's got a wide variety of people who love the show.
And it must be interesting as the host that's giving this information, and as you said, you're also learning this information as you open that envelope, which
right.
I think really also makes for really good TV, and to see your reaction in the moment. Can you speak to the emotional impact on, just as you're giving those results, to see the look on the parents' faces, just your own reaction to it? I mean, take us through like a moment when you're opening that envelope.
The worst emotional moment is when a man wants to be the father, but has doubts. The woman is sure that he's the father. I open up the envelope, he's not the father. And there's just unbelievable sadness.
Yeah.
And from the father, some anger. And so that's the most difficult aspect to deal with when those results come up. With the other results, when the father is happy he's not the father, or the mother is happy he is the father, at least you got some kind of on-air resolution that someone is going to be happy. But what I found out more than anything was that no matter what the answer, people have been living with this burden. They've been living with this big question, and they've always had this, and at least they can unburden themselves by coming on the show with a result.
Sometimes the unknown is scarier than the known.
Yes.
Of just sitting in that doubt and not being sure.
Exactly. And so at least we have that result. Now, I mean, you're the genetics expert, right? So how many times can I tell you that it's happened? Well, that test is wrong. And I go, I'm sorry, it's
99 point whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mean, but that's a fair fact, right?
Yeah. It's worth asking, of looking at the statistics. Well, how often can the test be wrong? And looking at that, I have my own patients asking questions like that, and it must be challenging. Sometimes it's very joyous that you're giving them information, like you said, that they've been wanting to hear, of dads that are crying and they're like, I just want confirmation, this is my bio kid. But obviously sometimes it goes the other way, or it's a negative outcome. What is running through your own head just witnessing these highly charged emotional moments? And I mean, guests have very strong reactions on the show. They're getting up out of their seats. Sometimes they're doing cartwheels. Sometimes they're breaking down. They're running backstage.
Right. What I try more than anything else to do is when the guy doesn't believe he's the father, I prove that he's the father. He's still upset. You might not think he wants to get into the child's life, so that if I can try to convince him to take the step forward and be in this child's life, that a child always has a better chance with a two-parent home than a one-parent home. And so therefore, I try to, focus him on that road. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I have hundreds, if not thousands, of cases in which the guy did get into the child's life, and he did co-parent, and this child did grow up with two parents in his or her life. And because the show's been on so long, 15, 20 years later, we bring the parents back and the child back.
And the teenager at that point.
Teenager,
yeah.
who's an adult, now an adult, has gone through school, has gone through college, has a job, maybe has her own family. So that kind of resolution, that's basically why I do these themes. And I always say to my critics, and there are critics out there, media critics all the time.
You're not big enough if you don't have critics. So.
You're exploitive, you exploited these people. And, well, if I can show them that thousands, I know thousands of fathers have gotten in the lives of these kids, then it's all worth it.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, sometimes parents really need that confirmation to say, okay, I want to be more involved and to make that commitment to be an active parent. And that is a beautiful outcome.
But I've also had fathers who won't get into the child's life the way they haven't gotten into their other kids' lives. And, fathers who've had 5, 6, 7, 8 kids, and they're not in their lives. And, so be it. And so therefore maybe I can tell the audience, which I do, this is not the way to go.
Right.
mean, this is not the way this child should be treated.
I think the people coming on, either if they're pregnant or already had the child, saying, okay, well, I want to know, am I pursuing this relationship because this is my child's biological father or not? Of just all the different pieces that can come together with this. What I think is interesting is that people are motivated to come on your show, right? And they're in this public format where they're on TV, which some of your YouTube videos have millions of views. And then you add on the whole, TV network. And so, the reach of your show is incredible. What do you think motivates people to come on your show, to do this testing publicly, as opposed to doing it privately through a provider like me, of going in an office and everything is private?
I think over the years we've built up the kind of respect that people have for us and how we do it. Secondly, there are a lot of people who can't pay for it. It's very expensive to have the real test, not the at-home test. To have the real test, it can be $1,000 or something like that.
Yeah, maybe even more than that if you're doing it during pregnancy. Yeah.
And so, therefore, we pay for that, and we bring them on, and we get a result. So I think there's a huge question of trust, and I'm so proud of, with my staff over the years, that the show has built that trust up.
Yeah, it really has, and I think you can see that with people that have come on the show multiple times,
right?
And with different children,
right? Of
doing testing. If people didn't have a positive experience on your show, they wouldn't be coming back.
Yeah,
third time.
And I've had women who've come back for the same child with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different guys, and the audience will boo them because they keep coming on. But I say, hey, look, anybody who has the courage, to be out in the public eye with these problems, and you continue to want to find the child's father, I give them credit.
There is this different perspective that you've touched on of the person coming in to do the testing. Do you find usually it's the biological mother coming in and saying, I'd like this testing to be performed, or the flip side?
Majority are the women.
Mm-hmm. Coming in and just wanting to know. Some
men have doubts and have convinced the woman to come on. Now you have to understand, and you do, but maybe your viewers, listeners, that here's the case. You got to do the test. That means 2 people have to show up with the baby. One person has to show up, one adult with the child, right? So that means if the mother is parenting the child and this guy is denying, you've got to get the mother coming with the child to the DNA testing site with that suspected father. And a lot of times, sometimes, they just don't do it because they're at odds with each other, and they just walk away without even taking the test.
With the lab that you use, their results can also stand up in court. So I would think it's also very helpful, as you said, that your show covers the cost of this. But for people to say, I already have the results to go into court with.
That's right. And guess what? If the guy doesn't want to be on part of the child's life and there's a child support question, that woman's going to take that test and bring it to court.
Yeah, very, very helpful, especially if they can't afford it, like you're mentioning. And, you know, obviously you've talked about, you've had so many cases. You probably don't remember them all, but I'm sure you remember a few that stand out to you. What comes to mind first of, I say a case, people coming on the show where you were either just shocked at how it happened or the circumstances of them coming in? What's a story that you really remember that you're always going to remember?
More than any other, and it's happened twice on our show. A woman is accusing a father of being the father of her twins. And I opened up the envelope. The first time it happened, I didn't believe it. He was the father of one, but not the other. And fraternal twins, I had no idea you could have two fathers. You know much more about this than I do. And I was I was in shock.
Yeah, you can see it on the look on your face when you're giving the results, how shocked you are the first time it happened. And that there's been about 20 cases in the world documented where we have fraternal twins with two different biological fathers, and you've had two of them, which is wild.
I just, that statistic just blows me.
Yeah.
Blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of people, I think, end up doing testing, but for those that do, we've had those cases documented, and you even had a case of maternity testing on your show, at least one.
Yeah, one was because somebody thought the child was switched at birth. And secondly, from time to time, it's an adult child that has somebody who says they're her mother or his mother, and they don't believe it. And so, just as reliable, right, as paternity testing?
I would think so. Yeah, I haven't performed it myself, so you have more experience in this than I do.
Well,
overall, I'd say.
Well, it's the same testing service that we use on the men.
Yes.
So I'm sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just looking to see if the biomarkers are there and they line up. It's just been such an honor to be able to talk to you of just, between being a talk show host for so many decades, I hope I'm sitting in this seat when I'm your age to be like, I've been doing it this many years, obviously different format. You've got a few more listeners and viewers than I do.
You're doing well on your own. Trust me, Kira. and by the way, you give me a lot of information. I'm so happy that you can confirm a lot of what we do on the show.
Yeah, you guys are going to have to check out the YouTube video. Link is in the show notes for that.
Okay.
And just thank you so much. Any parting thoughts for maybe advice for people that are thinking about doing parental testing, whether it be paternity, maternity? I mean, you're one of the experts with it.
All I can tell you is that I think it's so valuable to do it. It takes away all the question marks. It might not be what you want in terms of an answer and a result, but at least you'll know. And so I encourage everybody who can, please do it.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Maury Povich, the one and only. It has been an absolute pleasure to record right here at NBC Stamford Studios. It's really awesome that you guys are located right here, and thank you so much for coming on DNA today.
Thank you, Kira. Appreciate it.
For more information about today's episode, visit DNApodcast.com, where you can also stream all episodes of the show. We encourage your questions, comments, guest pitches, and ideas. Send them all into info@DNApodcast.com. Search DNA Today on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, so you can connect with us there. And a favor, please rate and review the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. This truly helps us climb the charts and allow more genetic nerds like yourself to find the show. DNA Today is hosted and produced by myself, Kira Deneen. Our social media lead is Corinne Merlino. Our video lead is Amanda Andrioli. Thanks for listening, and join us next time to discover new advances in the world of genetics.
The genes of you and me, the genes of you and me, they're all made of DNA. We're all made of the same chemical DNA. We're all made